Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar. We are happy to have you here, to have you join this conversation. And the big question for this conversation is, why do you eat what you eat? And what do you think some people think about some food groups here in Kenya? So it's a simple question, but when you sit down with it, it uncovers so much about what informs feeding and what informs food choices. So I'll be your moderator for the day. My name is Magdalene Muidali. I work with Fortified World Grain Alliance. And for this session, we will be working with you on the consumer research that explores what Kenyan households are eating, how they make those decisions, and what it means for fortified whole grains as a nutritious alternative to refined grains. So, on behalf of Fortified Whole Grain Alliance, who is the sponsor of this webinar and also who is the commissioner of this research, I want to thank you for joining us. We are thrilled to have such a diverse group of people join us today. So, just briefly about Fortified World Grain Alliance, it is a coalition of stakeholders cutting across the food system and basically dedicated to promoting the consumption, the production and consumption of fortified whole grains as a way of addressing the burden of malnutrition in low-income and middle-income countries. So I am joined by a group of incredible people, all the way from JQuat, Agnexus Africa, Ogilvy Africa, and Fortified World Grain Alliance, who led and supported different aspects of this research, each bringing a unique lens to the research. So I'll invite them to introduce themselves before we can dive into the research. So in this order, Collins, Joy, Sharon, and Vanessa, please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Collins Kaisha. I'm a research assistant at Jomo Kenyatta University, and I'm glad to be part of this webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you, Collins. Over to you, Joy. Sorry, you are muted.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Joy Murasi. I'm an associate at the Fortified Whole Grain Alliance and a co-investigator for this research that we're going to share findings. Thank you.
Thank you. My names are Sharon Moita. Coming in from Agnexus Africa. Agnexus Africa is a market research company that specializes in investigation in the agricultural sector. We were the key lead in investigating the research for what consumers are feeding in Kenya and what drives what motivates what they choose at their dinner table. We'll have more discussions with you. Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to welcome you all. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Vanessa Wanya from Ogilvy Africa. Ogilvy Africa is a marketing and communications agency network across 39 markets in Africa. And on this project with this group of people, have been coming in to support around the communication testing to see how we would be able to craft messaging and impactful storytelling, even just to be able to get people to make the shift or nudge them to the kind of behaviors in food that we want. So looking forward very much to the discussions and to your contributions as well.
Okay, thank you so much Tim, for that introduction. Just before we go into the details of the research, for our participants, we are very happy to have you join the call. So just a few notes or a few things to note before we start on. Would really love you to join this conversation. Would love to hear your thoughts. If you have any questions, use uh, the comment section, the chat box. We're just going to address all the questions that come in during and towards the end of the conversation. Also, would love to hear your thoughts on some of the insights that are going to be shared during the conversation. So please share your thoughts. And also, given that this is a live LinkedIn, feel free to share your reflections on LinkedIn. Tag us, tag Fortified Whole Grain Alliance, and use the hashtag Fortified FWGA. So let's get started. So just for you to understand maybe the depth of the research and how we came about this research, I'm going to invite Joy to walk us through the context of the research, how it was designed, who it targeted, and why whole grains are central to this conversation that you're having today. So over to you, Joy.
Okay, thank you, Magdalene. Just before we get into the findings for the research, I would like to give you a brief overview and background of what informed the study. So, Hali, if you could just project the screen. Yeah, so we conducted a study to identify the barriers and increase the consumption of fortified whole grains with the main goal of shifting consumption habits towards the consumption of fortified whole grains. Before we get into the results, there are different nuances that inform the study, and I'd like to paint a global picture and as well as come down to the Kenyan perspective. So next slide. Yeah. So just to paint a global picture, approximately 1 out of 3 children globally are suffering from one form of malnutrition. It could either be undernutrition, it could be overnutrition, or micronutrient deficiency, which when put together are called the triple burden of malnutrition. So in addition to this problem, you find that currently, especially in the low and middle income countries, we also have non-communicable diseases. And surprisingly, you find that now in this current time, a whole 77% of deaths that are related to the non-communicable diseases are coming from low and middle income countries. I know many people have assumed it's the other way around, but yes, this is the current statistic that we have. And one of the major causes that has been identified to cause this problem is low consumption of whole grain foods, as well as overconsumption of refined grains. And you find that Kenya is not even left out of this, because currently in our country you find there's an increased reliance of consumption of these ultra processed foods across the market, and not just consumption but even marketing. Perhaps some of you could tell us how many of you have seen food, a whole grain food or a healthy food being marketed across your screens or radio. Maybe you could tell us that after this. However, the country has made strides in terms of combating these different forms of malnutrition that we currently experience. And some of the interventions that we have put across include fortification, which began in the 1970s with salt iodization. And then in 2012, the fortification of maize flour, of wheat flour, oils and fats was enacted and is now compulsory. We also have other interventions, the high impact nutrition interventions. We have the school feeding programs. We have a whole lot of interventions in a bid to address this discourse. However, despite the efforts that we have made, malnutrition still persists. We still have gaps within malnutrition. And from the Demographic Health Survey of 2022, which is the current one, you find that the rate of stunting is at 18%, across the country. And you find we have 5% levels of stunting. And when it comes to consumption of the minimal acceptable diet among children, you find that only 37% have achieved the minimum dietary diversity. This means that they are consuming the minimum recommended number of food groups, that are required per day. And you find that only 31% of children then have achieved the minimum acceptable diet, which is very low. With this in mind, then we find that fortified whole grains is a good strategy to address this malnutrition, whether the triple burden, whether if it's undernutrition, micronutrient deficiency, or overnutrition. And why will that be so? This is because it combines two different aspects. That is fortification. So you get the benefits of micronutrients through the fortification, as well as you get the benefits of whole grains, which are healthier and nutritionally packed. So when you bring these two together, you get that fortified whole grains are actually at least 5 times more nutritious than the refined whole grains that we get to consume currently. So this background actually informed the study. So one may ask themselves then, why fortified whole grains? So, Hali, next. So as mentioned, depending on the grain, fortified whole grains are at least 5 times more nutritious than the refined grains that we get to consume. In addition to that, they also yield positive environmental impact in that you get to feed more people with less land, less water, and less fertilizer use, as well as less emissions, less carbon emissions. Another key aspect of fortified whole grains is that through different economic models that we have been able to run and test, we have found out that actually you can produce formulas, you can produce a fortified whole grain at cost parity. This means that there's no incremental cost when you get to produce a fortified whole grain as to producing, as when you produce the refined grains. And in some instances, it can even be cheaper. So those are the key reasons why we advocate for the consumption of fortified whole grains. So now in this study, as earlier mentioned, that our main goal is we want to shift behavior, consumption behavior towards consumption of more nutritious and healthier foods. For example, the fortified whole grains. But before we do that, we need to understand the consumers. We need to understand what they consume, why they consume them, why they choose to consume, who are the key decision makers. So this forms part of the objectives that we looked at. And the first one, we sought out to understand the consumers and the food consumption patterns. Who are the key decision makers at the household? What roles do the different participants in the household play? The male, the female, the children, both boys and girls. So we looked at that from a gender lens. What are their consumption habits? What do they consume on a holiday? What do they consume on a daily basis? So we looked at all that under the consumption patterns. Then we sought out to understand what are the drivers. What makes you choose to consume a whole grain at the household? And what makes you choose not to? What are the driving forces? Is it health? Is it availability? Is it access? Is it taste? What puts you off and what do you like about it? So these are what we sought out to look at. And then we also analyze the school feeding ecosystem because our initial point of entry will be through the institutional feeding programs, and one channel will be the school feeding. So we sought to understand who are the key players within the school feeding ecosystem, what foods are consumed, what policies exist within this sector. And then lastly, we also gathered insights from key stakeholders like nutritionists, researchers, other non-governmental organizations on the best way to promote consumption of this nutritious commodity. Then once we gathered all these insights, then they will be used to tailor a targeted social and behavior change campaign towards the promotion of fortified whole grains. Next. Yeah, and we undertook a mixed method research, which involved the qualitative phase as well as the quantitative data collection. So we first began with the qualitative phase, whereby we conducted focus group discussions. We had key informant interviews, and we also had in-home immersions, whereby it constituted accompanied shoppings as well as a product test at the household level. So we provided different households with the product, a fortified whole grain maize flour, whereby they got to prepare it, different foods, and then they gave us feedback on what they thought about the product in terms of the sensory attributes. So once we got the insights and the findings from this qualitative phase of the study, we used it to tailor the surveys that were collected during the quantitative phase, whereby any matter that we felt needed further probing during the quantitative phase, then we added those questions during this particular phase. Next. And then, so we had a total of 21 FGDs and 34 key informant interviews, which comprised millers and milling associations. We had researchers and non-governmental organizations. We had community leaders, who you find in many cases are the voices and trusted voices within these communities that we have. We had educators, we had policy makers from different ministries, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture. And then we also got to hear from nutritionists and health experts. We had 8 study areas, that is Nairobi and Mombasa, which was the urban, and then Murang'a, Uasin Gishu, Kitui, Turkana, and Kakamega, which was the rural. Yeah, so at this point, I think I'll hand it over to my colleague, Magdalene, to hand over to Collins. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joy, for walking us through the design of the research. just for giving us such a strong foundation to understand how the research came about and why it's very important. I think it's very interesting just to learn that in as much as in Kenya we have a lot of diverse foods and nutritious, wholesome foods, the rates of malnutrition are quite high. And I think it just calls upon different stakeholders and even the consumers themselves to come together and address these. And maybe just before we move to Collins, to address the big jargon, maybe on what whole grains are. First of all, the grains, we have the big three grains, which we have the rice, we have the maize, we have the wheat. And when we say refined grains, what we mean is the during the milling process, that grain is some parts of that grain are removed. So we have the bran and the germ which are removed, which is the cover and the center, the small part at the center, they are removed. So when they're removed, that is milled, you get a refined flour. But when the whole grain is milled, that is the germ is not removed, the germ is not removed, the outer part is not removed, then you'll have a whole grain flour, and it differs slightly in color. For the whole grain, it's somehow yellowish, brownish, and maybe just for the Kenyans in the room, that is what is called grade 2, commonly called grade 2 when you go to the posho mill or the micro mill. So now let's just go back to get the numbers and hear just get to hear about the numbers and actually we learn what most households in Kenya are eating and why they are eating what they are eating. So I'll invite Collins to take us through the quantitative insights from the research. So over to you, Collins.
Thank you very much, Magdalene. Thank you, Joe, for your presentation also. My name is Collins Kaisha. I was part of the research team from Jomo Kenyatta, which assisted in the development of the results and the discussions of this study. And from the understanding, kindly next, Melly. Yes, from the sample size which Joy has clearly distributed, our analysis was based on the rural-urban perspective, where the rural was in the households which were located in the rural areas of Uasin Gishu, Murang'a, Kakamega, and Kitui, Turkana County, while the urban was represented by the households which were surveyed in Nairobi and Mombasa County. Also, on certain indicators, we were also able to have a gender look on what exactly is happening from that perspective of male and female understanding. And an important aspect which, before we proceed to the analysis or the full analysis, was we wanted to have an understanding and also the listeners to be able to understand the demographic characteristics of the respondents who are in this, who participated in this study. Next, Melly. So the demographic characteristics of the respondents who participated, and when we'll be referring and when we'll be drawing conclusions and recommendation, will be based on this target group who had participated in these studies. We are talking about the households, households which were surveyed had an average of 5 household members, and from these 5 members, we saw that there were also presence of male and female members of the households. And at least each of these households was having a child who was attending school. Remember, one of the initiative and strategy towards changing the consumption habits of households is through school feeding programs. So at least among these households which were surveyed, they had a child who was attending primary school. Additionally, the majority of the respondents who participated in this study were female and who are between the age also of between 35 and 44. This is a very active, both biological and also economical active age group. And most of the, and also majority of them were married. This is a very important aspect because it gives us the understanding that at the household level, other than the head of a household, the spouse is present towards making decisions regarding meal planning. Another important aspect which we were also able to understand about the demographics of this group was, yes, next, was on the education aspect and also on the occupational aspect. From a rural and urban perspective, we acknowledged the study was able to show that majority of the respondents and the respondents had attained at least basic education, which is the primary school education. But from the perspective of post-primary education, we saw more of urban respondents having attained post-primary education. These are talking about secondary, college, and also the college and university levels. And this also reflected in the occupation of the main household income earners, where we saw majority of the urban dwellers being skilled entrepreneurs, professional managerials. But if you look at we were able to see that the rural household, main household income earners, either engaging in agricultural activities or they reported at the moment of report as unemployed. Already this is giving us a very worrying, cost and the price of food ingredients will become a challenge to the people coming from this section in our country. Further from the occupation, consistently we are able to see even in the income levels, where we see majority of the households which had reported to have an income of below 10,000 being reported in these in the rural areas on the households which reported to be unemployed or are engaging in agricultural activities. So already we understand that these results were indicating that price or the cost of ingredients will become an important indicator or factor which will influence the meal decision and even influencing whether to participate towards uptake of whole grain foods or not. Now, already we have been able to see that majority of the respondents in the study were married, the status were married. So meaning that who then is making the decisions at this household? This was an important indicator which we were able to the study was able to bring out. The study was able to establish that, yes, a significant proportion of men were participating towards the purchase and even deciding what to be purchased at the household. But a more intriguing result was that women tend to be integral part in decision making at the household level. What do I mean? Is that yes, they not only participate towards purchase, but they also participate towards planning and actual preparation of this of the meals at the household levels. This is very important, and these results are very key because it also indicates to us that even when we are doing promotion and educative studies towards healthy eating, we not only need to focus on only men only or women only, but we have to focus on both the male and the female heads in the households. Thank you. Proceed, please. Now, what were the key things which we are able to understand or the factors which influenced meal planning other than the decision makers? Yes, we find tremendous factors. So many factors influenced the meal planning process. But the most important or the primary factors which came out very strongly was the family normally observes the nutritional value of the meal which is being prepared. The second important aspect was the family preference. What do the family members prefer to consume? That influenced meal planning. Cost of ingredients. Previously, we saw that income was a very important aspect towards this influence towards meal planning because it informs the cost of ingredients. Cost of ingredients will be influenced with what is the purchasing power of the household member. So it came in as an important primary factor which influenced meal planning. Another important aspect was an availability of ingredients. Are these ingredients of the meal being prepared available at ease? Is it accessible? So it came out very strongly that these four important factors influenced meal planning. Other secondary factors include emotional factors, age, dietary trends. These, yes, the study was able to acknowledge, yes, they influence, but they come in as secondary factors. Proceed, please. Now, we have heard from the previous presenters talking about consumption of whole grain foods, consumption of fortified whole grain foods. But the study started from the point of, are they even aware of whole grain foods? Are they even aware of fortified foods? The study was able to establish consumption of whole grain foods, not fortified, but whole grain foods, is not it's not a new thing at the household level. It's something actually which is being done and it's been uptake, where we found that almost even 98% of the households which were interviewed were currently consuming whole grain foods. And the common whole grain foods which were being consumed include the maize ugali, maize porridge, wheat chapati, bread, millet, sorghum, oats, and rice. There's an important result here which I want the listeners and also our viewers to be able to view is on the maize ugali, where we find that that was the most common whole grain food which was consumed among the households. And this makes it a very important food for us during this process of campaigning towards consumption of fortified whole grain foods. Maize ugali flour then becomes a very important aspect because we are in the process of developing better product called fortified whole grain foods. And now maize whole grain ugali, which is currently being consumed by majority of the households, will become a very important entry point towards shifting this trend. Kindly proceed. So yes, we acknowledge this, the consumption, but what would limit the frequency of consumption of whole grain foods? And one of the things which we have been able to acknowledge was the pricing and the cost of the ingredients. And consistently, we are able to see these households, the main thing which was reported was on high pricing of whole grain products, availability, where most of the whole grain products might not be available, which might also limit their consumption of daily intake of these whole grain foods. The tests, and that was the reason why we also conduct immersion tests, which will also be presented by my fellow colleagues. So the test, some of the household members were also able to say they don't like the taste of that food or the specific whole grain food. And also another important aspect which came was on the time it takes to prepare this food. So already we are starting to see also additional variations where we are seeing that also people are very cautious towards other factors such as the time taken to prepare this food. So these are key factors. We're talking about price, we're talking about availability, we're talking about taste and preference, and also not leaving out the time taken to prepare this food. Convenience was an important factor which limits consumption of these whole grain foods. Therefore, we have been talking about fortified. Already we have seen consumption of whole grain foods. Let's see. Are they aware of this fortified before we develop or kind of introduce or kind of push towards consumption of this fortified whole grain? Do they know about fortified whole grain? The study was able to show that. Kindly proceed. What are the key sources of this whole grain maize flour? So there's that consumption, and already we have seen whole grain maize flour was coming out to be a very strong or the most consumed popular whole grain food which was being consumed. The main sources of this whole grain maize flour were the local shops, open markets, local millers. And when we will be talking about, when the households were talking about availability of these whole grain foods, they were talking about these sources, and especially where we are talking about whole grain maize flour, when they talk about availability, they are talking about being present in local shops, markets, and local millers. And even when they were asked about how they perceive how do they perceive whole grain maize flour. From our radar chart, we were able to see that the levels of acceptability from a rate of 0 to 5, from 1 to 5, we were able to see there was high levels of acceptability. There was high levels of perception towards whole grain maize flour being nutritious. But there were two important aspects which did not score high, and that is the availability and its availability in preferred packaged forms. So already it shows that if we can be able to deal with availability, already we are seeing the positive trend towards whole grain foods. It means that, and there's high chances for people to consume actually more frequent on these whole grain foods. Kindly proceed. Now, we have been talking about fortified foods. Do they even understand or know what fortified foods are? According to the study was able to showcase only half of the respondents or the households which participated in this survey were aware about what fortified foods are. And especially the rural areas where the levels were reported to be very low, where compared to the urban areas. And when they were asked what, for those who are aware of these fortified foods, when they were asked which fortified food they were able to kind of understand or know, maize flour came in as the most known fortified foods, followed by wheat flour, porridge, rice, salt, and oil margarine. But there was also an important result here. Maize flour, I know there's a lot of campaign and there's labels on it. That might be the reason why there's high levels of awareness. But for salt, we realized when Joy was doing her opening remarks, he was able to showcase that salt iodization has been done ever since 1970. But you see the level of awareness is low. And one of the reasons is because the campaigns had already been done, and right now almost each and every household that is existing in Kenya, there's presence of iodized salt. It's just that people are not aware that they are consuming iodized salt. When it comes to rice, the level of awareness was high compared to salt. And one of the reasons which came out, one of the reasons is because during when we were undertaking this study, we were able to understand that also one of the important processors and also manufacturer or processor of millers of rice was doing a promotion towards consumption of fortified rice, and that was one of the reasons why the levels of awareness of rice was high compared to salt. Proceed, please. So, other than awareness, are they able to understand? Do the households, do the individuals who participated in these households understand what these fortified foods mean? From our assessment and how they perceive fortified foods to be, we were able to acknowledge that there was a positive trend towards fortified foods. And when we're talking about positive trends, it is on aspects regarding essential towards improving their nutritional intake, health development, and also cognitive development, especially among the children, where they were asking statements on brain development. So there's that aspect that it was important to their health and development. But also we cannot downplay concerns which were also highlighted. There was some segment of the society which was also reporting that they did not believe that there was any benefits. And also some were saying they were worried that it might not be natural. The nutrients are not natural. This now they refer it to more of chemical perspective. Or some, they were like, no, this thing might not deliver exactly what it's you guys are telling us. So this shows that there is a gap which needs to be filled, not only on awareness, where we saw only half were aware of fortified foods, but also we need to also put an emphasis towards the benefits that comes with fortified foods. Kindly proceed. Children are important aspects, and they are the future of our country and our existence. So therefore, if we want to introduce a certain habit, especially on consumption, then it is easy for a child to develop a habit, to grow with a certain habit. And this habit which we want here is towards consumption of healthy foods, that is fortified whole grain foods. We were able to do an assessment to kind of understand what in a normal day, there are three important meals. There's breakfast, lunch, and supper. The study wished to understand what are the common foods which these children consume in a daily basis on the three important meals. From our results, we came to realize that consumption of whole grain meals across these important meals, whole grain consumption was less popular. And this prompts us to have a further inquiry, like, then how do these children perceive between whole grain foods and refined foods? From our next results, kindly next, we were able to understand that the study was able to understand there is an incline towards refined foods because of certain aspects. These include the children who are reporting that refined food has the best taste. Most of my friends prefer it. It has a pleasant appearance. So already we are seeing across both in the rural and urban, there's high incline towards refined foods. And it's because of the test. Most of the friends here introduced the idea of peer pressure within the society, the children groups, and their parents. So it means that even when we will be pushing towards developing of fortified whole grain products, and here in our case, where we know one of our important products is maize flour, which is commonly consumed in the household, we will be targeting towards developing the tests, developing the appearance, and also create that awareness among many children, because we have seen the influence of friends towards consumption habits among children. Other than that, we've been able to observe that children also are very much aware that consumption of whole grain foods is good for their bodies, and also it's good for old people, because they believe Babu or Daddy needs some nice nutrients, Dad, Mom needs some nice nutrients or important nutrients for them. So they acknowledge that whole grain foods are important sources of nutrients for their bodies towards good health and development. Kindly proceed. Now, there are two important areas where children spend their time. This will be at home, which is highly controlled by their parents and guardians, and at school. So the question will be, at home we have seen the trends which are happening, but at school, what do they find their lunch, which is an important meal which they tend to consume while at school? We tend to understand that the most important sources of lunch, especially with bringing in the school feeding initiative, is that majority of the children who participated in this study ate their lunch from school. Already this becomes very important, especially in the urban areas where we saw there was high levels of consumption of the participation in school feeding program among children compared to the rural. It already gives us an indication that the school feeding program is already set in Kenya and it's happening. Therefore, using this as an initiative is become even much better, a better vehicle towards campaigning towards school fortified whole grain consumption among children. Kindly proceed. And when we need to understand who are the sponsors, even if we are saying that they need to kind of change or kind of advocate towards fortified whole grain foods, we find that the sponsors of this school feeding program are three important people. These include the parents, especially in the rural areas, the county government, especially in the urban areas, and the national government, who are important sponsors of school feeding programs. Therefore, these results indicate to us there's that need for multi-stakeholder. These are talking about parents, Ministry of Education, the county government, to come in towards strengthening this vehicle towards changing consumption habits. So already this is an opportunity which we are seeing is existing, and it's recommending the need for multi-stakeholder initiative collaborations. Kindly proceed. Before I complete, it's very important for us to, even though the way we have been able to see any initiative, you have to check what do the guardians think regarding this initiative. And an important reason why we find school feeding program to be very important is because even the attitude of the parents towards this school feeding program or this vehicle is that there is a positive attitude. Why? Parents were able to acknowledge that children are able to get balanced diet, they are able to concentrate and perform better, they are able to get a meal. So already we have seen parents having a positive attitude towards this school feeding program. However, there are certain areas also which need to be articulated and also be improved. We are talking about the concerns which parents were able to raise regarding the quality, the hygiene, and also where parents are the ones kind of financing or financing the process, it tends to be expensive. And this is the reason why previously we were able to see who are the sponsors. And that's the reason why the study acknowledged that there's need for that multi-stakeholder collaboration between parents, the school, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education to come in and also to strengthen this vehicle of ours towards school, towards changing the habits of our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Collins, for that very informative session. I think so
Yes,
much to pick.
Magdalene, maybe what I can say before you just proceed. Yes, we have a very rich, very enormous and rich findings, very enormous. But we were able to, just for a disclaimer, to also to kind of brief our listeners and viewers that we have only cherry picked the key areas to showcase so that we don't miss the point towards the study. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for highlighting that, Collins. Yes, there's more into the research than what has just been presented. And I saw someone on the comment question asking whether these findings are going to be open and shared. Yes, once the report is finalized, we're going to publish this on our website. That is Fortified World Grain Alliance. So please, you can always stay connected, and also we'll be sharing some findings on through our LinkedIn. So follow us, stay connected, so that you can get notified once that is out. The one for Rita inquiring about the other regions that the research was conducted. For the rural regions, it's Murang'a, Turkana, Kakamega, Kitui, and Uasin Gishu. Yeah, so thanks a lot for the comments. Please keep them coming. If you have any questions, if you want to chime in, as you can see, the insights are quite rich. Would love to hear your thoughts. So now that you've gotten the numbers and gotten to know how Kenyan households are feeding, I would want us to go beyond that, and I'm going to invite Sharon to take us into homes, shops, kitchen tables, and also what some of these key stakeholders within the food system spectrum get to think. So over to you, Sharon.
Thank you very much. And I want to recognize my previous speakers. Thank you for your contributions. They are well. And before I begin into talking about the qualitative part of the study, there was a question on the chart that asked about how the regions were identified. Thank you very much, Maureen, for that question. And this falls right into the research company, because how did they get this? We wanted to do a national study across the country, and we really felt that research is expensive. We cannot go everywhere. So we want to have a sample of a representation of particular regions in the country. So one of the things that we looked into is we have different criteria for selection of these counties. For example, Uasin Gishu is a breadbasket of our country. That's where we get a lot of maize from. We also wanted to get views from other parts of the country. For example, Turkana, where we have many NGOs and development partners doing great initiatives there. So we wanted to feel, how is it from their perspective? Do they feel any impact of these NGOs? So we wanted to also hear their voice. We also wanted to consider, like Nairobi is the capital city, various dietary patterns with a mix of many people coming from areas. What are they consuming in the urban areas? Does that differ from the people consuming in their rural areas? So that's why we had different towns that we had selected. We wanted to have a mix of the urban areas as well as the rural areas as well. I hope I have answered your question. In case I've not, please let me know and I can explain more further. We'll also give the criteria for information that will be in the expanded report. Thank you. So let me go straight on to my presentation. Thank you. Next. So for the qualitative study, we wanted to really understand the perceptions, the whys, and the reasons why people are consuming what they're consuming. So we really asked them, what do you take in the morning? What do you take in the afternoon? How many meals actually are you having in a particular day? How many does everyone have in your family? Does everyone consume 3 meals a day or 4 meals a day? Do children have snack in between? So we were asking all these questions. So we went to specifically, because our focus right now, we wanted to consider whole grains. We asked them, what do you understand to be whole grains? And these are what they told us are whole grains according to them. To them, whole grains are grains and legumes as well. They put them there, that none part of it has been removed. So whole grain, they consider them to be natural foods. They gave us examples of millet, of sorghum, rice, maize, wheat, and even the beans and the peas, depending on the location of where they're coming from. For example, the people in Kitui, they were telling about the baazi, they were talking about the green grams, because that is what they are consuming on a regular basis. Thank you. Next. And out of the whole grains that they said that they mentioned, the most popular whole grain that was mentioned was maize flour. And as we also saw from the quantitative part of the research, maize flour had 90% consumption, awareness of maize flour. So also in the homes, this is the most consumed whole grain type. There is a lot of intake of whole grains, particularly in the rural areas, and they are consuming them in different formats. We see the githeri, the mokimo, and different parts of the country will have different variations. Even if it's that githeri, when we go to Kakamega, they add a little bit of some green, what do they call it, ground nuts in the githeri. When we go to Kitui, they were taking the nzenga, which is also considered a whole grain meal, and mokimo. In Muranga, they had a lot of that, and this was consumed across, whether it was children or the adults. They were taking also the blended ugali, that is mostly in millet and sorghum, blended with the maize flour. So we saw a lot of that. For this study, we mentioned that for the qualitative part, we talked to parents who had children in school. So most of the time they would say, I'll prepare porridge for them, either millet, wimbi porridge, or sorghum, or a blended type of porridge. There's also the whole grain chapati and the whole grain bread that were common across. Next. So when we look at the different patterns, because really our objectives of this study was to see what are the patterns coming across. Are there any relationship between people in the rural areas and people in the urban areas? We saw very distinct patterns, and for sure we saw that people in the rural are consuming more whole grains compared to their counterparts in the urban areas. And here in the urban, we are talking about Mombasa and Nairobi. And one of the reasons we asked them, what is driving you to consume whole grains? Mostly the people in the rural area said, one, availability. They have the maize in their farms. So of course, they're gonna get the maize from their farms and consume that as well, compared to the urban people who they would be forced to go out and buy that. They don't have that particularly in their farms because of limitations of space and other factors. Those who are consuming mostly in the urban areas, they mentioned that they are driven mostly by nutrition benefits. So we see a particular segment of the population coming up to selectively consume whole grains for their nutritional benefits that they have learned. When we look at the differences between the men and the women, we say main consumption of the men is, yes, the whole grains are available. And one of the key factors that we saw there is the need for satiation. The men, especially in the rural areas, are going out to do heavy manual jobs, and therefore they are looking for, you see, I need something that is gonna hold me for some time, and then I won't get hungry quickly. So by this time I will still be full, I can still continue with my work before I come back to the house. And we saw for the women, mostly the ones who were, they were mostly preferred the refined type of maize flour. And we asked them why, they said sensory issues, the taste of the refined. And when we talk about the refined maize flour, is the common ones that we have in the shops and in the supermarket. And maybe you can, guys, you can write in the comments the most common brands of maize flour that you are consuming for you and your family, so that we can also do a small research here in our audience today. Yeah, so they mentioned the difficulty of cooking off the whole grains. So they said, this is where I would prefer the refined one, the one in the packet form, as compared to the one that is not refined. And they considered whole grains as bland and unappealing to them. Next. Despite their perceptions and what they told us about whole grains, on an overall basis, the whole grains are considered nutritious, filling, natural, and healthy. So we can see very positive associations of the whole grain foods. And we saw that, yes, people are consuming whole grains. And what do they think about them? They think them as filling, natural, healthy. And despite this, there were some concerns about the cooking time, the texture, and the shelf life. Some of them said, yes, for the ordinary flour, the nutritional flour is higher. So ordinary is what they would consider the whole grain flour. We saw in different parts of the country, they have different names they refer to as the whole grain. So for example, in people from Muranga, they would call them ordinary flour. People in Kitui would call the whole grain flour tutu. Yeah, others would call it grade 2, like that. So they have different terminologies that they mentioned of the whole grains. So they said, yes, many people know that brown foods are healthy, but they still need to be constantly reminded of the benefits. These are the men in the urban areas. And remember, the urban areas, they just mentioned to us that, yes, I know they're healthy, but I would prefer to consume the refined maize meal flour. Mombasa men, they said, yeah, brown foods are person with problems like diabetes. So because myself, I don't have these problems, I'm not sick, why should I be going out to look out for, brown foods? And then we have even the females. You see the females themselves, they say it tastes like you're eating githeri and it takes up some time to cook. So we see the concerns that are there, that they're talking about, the whole grain flour. Next. Next, Haley. Mm-hmm. And because of this, we had a section of the research where we went out to the homes and we gave them a product which was not labeled. It was a plain unlabeled packet of flour. And we told them, can you just cook ugali and cook it? Most of the time we went during their midday meal when they were preparing meals for their family. And we requested them to prepare it in the normal way that they would, And we observed. These were called home immersions. We went, stayed with them for a period for up to 4 or 5 hours from the beginning, when they would start, preparing maybe the accompaniment, and then the ugali, and then would say, look at what they're doing. Is it the type of fuel that you're using for this type of flour, the assessment of the product. And this is what they had to tell us, this flour that you gave us, they said the texture is good. The texture of this product is smooth and soft. However, some mentioned that this texture is a little bit too fine than what I'm used to, and therefore I would think it would be better if I had prepared porridge with it. Yeah. So in terms of taste, most of the respondents, all of them actually agreed that this ugali had good taste. The color, they said it is appealing. However, there are some of them that mentioned that, it's not as dark as they had thought it would be. But then they said it is similar to the whole grain meal flour. Remember, we had not indicated whether this was whole grain or not. We just gave them a product and asked them to prepare it. So this was their initial unprompted responses. In terms of the smell, it was appealing to most of them. They said it has an appealing aroma, similar to that of the whole grain from that they get from the local posho mills. Next. So because some of the people mentioned that they found that it would have been better if they had prepared some porridge with it. So we asked a separate group of respondents to prepare porridge and give us feedback on it. And for the group that tested the porridge, they were very, very positive. They said, gave very positive feedback on the taste and sensory experience. So whether it is the texture, once they blended it in, they said it is very rich and satisfying. And they compared this to a blended type of flour that is currently in the market. And they said, it looks like it has some milk. Did you put some milk powder in it? But we said we had not. But then the consistency of it when making porridge really informed us that it was very, they said it was good to them. In terms of the texture, it was smooth, easy to mix, easy to preparation, ease of preparation, easy to cook, it mixed well, and then it also required minimal stirring. In terms of the cooking time, depending on the household and how many people we were preparing for, it ranges from 10 to 30 minutes. And also, this time was dependent on what fuel that they used. Those who used gas and electricity were faster, while those who used firewood and charcoal took longer. In terms of color and appearance, they mentioned it appears darker, but this, just for your information, it did not give us a negative connotation, because for them, porridge is not expected to be bright white as compared to, excuse me, as compared to the ugali. So when preparing ugali, it's like the consumers are expecting it to be very, very white. But when they're preparing the porridge, they expect it to be darker. So when we gave this whole grain flour and they noticed it's turning a little bit of brown, they said it's still appealing. It's still okay for me. So we asked them, would they be willing to buy this product if we put it in the shelves and put it we put it in the shops? And they said, yes, we would be willing to buy it, provided it was available and affordable. We even asked them, how much can you pay for this product, for 1 kilo of this flour? Surprisingly, they mentioned the current price of the flour, and if it's 100 shillings, because they found that it's good, they said I would add 20 shillings and still buy it. But if it's available, affordable, I will buy it and cook for my family. All right, next. So we also had a separate group where we asked them to go and do some shopping as we observe their behavior, what we call the shop-alongs. For the shop-alongs, we had identified particular segments of the population who still fitted our criteria for the research. That is, they had to have children in school, they had to have particular regions. However, we did not talk to people we had talked to in the other segments. For example, if you had participated in the focus groups, we did not interview you. If you had participated in the home immersions, we did not interview for the shop-alongs. We took a different segment, but same criteria. So we offered them some amount of money, which was equivalent to what they would buy for their weekly shopping. And it was interesting what they chose to purchase. Almost everyone, all the consumers that we interviewed, they had to buy a refined packet of maize flour, which was interesting because we did not influence them. And what we asked them is just make a list, tell us what you have, and this is the money that you have. So the only limitation was on the budget. So they had, for them, most of them wanted to buy as much as possible. You can see one of the pictures there. They buy the chapati flour, the maize flour, there is some soap, there is also a liquid oil that is measured in specific quantities at the shops. There's also the soap and milk. And also they went outside in the grocery at the Kibanda store to pick up some vegetables and fruits. So what some of the things that we noted is major factors are price, convenience, and brand familiarity. What would influence the food purchases that they chose to buy? So they would go to a shop and say, I really want to buy a packet of maize flour. But which one would you choose? Because there are various in the shop, and they would say, give me this. Most of them mentioned, if I'm allowed to, chose Kavagara, especially in the rural areas. In the urban areas, they had different brands that they chose, but all of them bought the refined flour. And none of them decided to buy whole grain. Why? We saw from our research and from the insights that we developed that the refined maize flour is an inspirational brand. The brands there, and we mentioned, Joy mentioned a little bit of the communication, what's happening, the adverts and things like this in the market. We don't see as much noise or influence of in the radio and the TV of whole grain, but we can see Kavagara and the rest of the other refined flour products being advertised in the media. Okay, next. So on an overall basis, we wanted to understand what are the key barriers and drivers to whole grain consumption flour. And we saw very many drivers and very many barriers. And most of them are kind of go hand in hand. On one hand, we have noticed that people are aware and are seeking healthier foods. So the main motivation to consuming whole grain maize flour is it's healthier, it's better for me, I get better digestion, and it has blood sugar control. We had some mentions of people who mentioned that it's for diabetes, and it also has more nutrients for the body. In terms of satiety, it's keeping me longer, full for longer. So I'd rather have this meal than have 3 more meals in the day. So once I take that meal, I'll be good. The other aspect is, yes, whole grains are providing the physical strength and endurance. I need that strength for the particular role and job that I'm doing, especially people in the rural areas. They are going to do manual work in the shamba. So they require this, and they recognize that whole grains will provide this for them. Whole grains, we've seen also, they have positive associations of being natural and wholesome, unlike the counterparts of the refined flour. It's also very easily accessible, especially for those who are growing their own maize. They have a farm, or they have a nearby access to a posher mill in the nearby areas. It's also seen as more economical, especially when it's homegrown and I only have to pay for the milling. It's also rooted in tradition, familiarity, and identified among the communities. In terms of the barriers, we saw there are a few issues that came up: the taste and perceptions. People prefer the smoothness of the ugali, and we have seen a lot of media emphasizing the whiter the flour, the better it is for. It's marketed as better, so people will fall for that. Also, it's perceived to have a higher cost, although it may not be the truth. And also for millers, because we also spoke to the millers and other stakeholders, they said it has limited profitability because I already have demand for the refined one. Why should I also go to do this and increase my costs? In terms of awareness for them, you see, I have to really put a lot of effort in increasing the awareness and understanding of the benefits of whole grains. When we look around in the retail shops, it's still not available outside of the urban areas. Shorter shelf life. And in terms of policy, we talked to some policy makers, and they mentioned that, yes, there is no strong incentives to encourage the whole grain production, although efforts people will have been emphasized to be taking on healthier diets. But in terms of enforcement and any incentives that the millers have to come, and when they mill whole grains, these are the incentives that they get, it's not there. In terms of the millings and distribution challenges, favoring only the refined flour, which is mostly driven by the demand in the market. Next. So we want to look at, like we mentioned, we talked to the stakeholders, including millers, community leaders, school administrators, nutritionists, health experts, and policymakers. And all along, they mentioned, yes, these are the refined flours. These are that is more preferred due to the demand in the market. But we saw whole grains as niche, and they're nutritious. They're traditionally recognized. We talked to the community leaders. Yes, they're saying in our community, the chiefs, the religious leaders, they recognize them as nutritious and filling. We had some concerns as we had mentioned. These also, the stakeholders also agreed with the consumers that the taste and color mentions the concerns have been there. But let's look around and see the opportunities that were suggested by these stakeholders. The miller said, there's an opportunity for us to have a product innovation, improve the palatability of this flour. If we need to refine it further to have a soft, a smaller grain of flour texture, we can be able to do that. But we are asking for an awareness campaign. We are asking for the government incentives so that if I myself as a miller, I'm going to, change my production to have this? What is the incentives that I get? Yeah. And then in terms of the rest, get the community leaders. Yes, we will leverage the barazas, the radios, increase the level of education. The school administrators really mentioned to us that the children prefer refined flour, but we can change this narrative. We can use whole grain flour in their existing meals. We are giving them porridge, we are giving them kideri. We can engage the parents and um, and we can engage the parents and the school boards so that we can collaborate with this and expand the, the consumption of whole grains. For the nutritionists and the experts, yes, they mentioned, for sure, we see that there's low public awareness. So we need to emphasize on the public sensitization and advocate for fortified food in different institutions. They mentioned the hospitals, the schools, and then there is also a collaboration with different food producers. People are producing these whole grains, but where are they? Are they sending them to schools? Do schools have access to these whole grains? Or they're just saying, yes, we need to cook for our children, but we'll just buy the nearby that is cheapest, that is access. If there can be that linkage, there can be better access to whole grain flour and better consumption of whole grain maize flour. The policymakers in the government really are aware of the health benefits, and we saw that there is no focused policy that specifically talks about whole grain consumption. There are policies like of nutrition, the nutrition policy that is there, emphasizing on whole grains, on healthy consumption, but there is no policy that is focusing on whole grain. So for the standards that are there, the millers who have been mandated to, fortify their products, is the enforcement there? It's very minimal. So they are collaborating for this and advocating for mandated fortified whole grains in the school meals as well. The NGOs and the researchers as well advocating for education campaigns. So we can see across all stakeholder groups, one of the key common theme across is increase awareness, educate, public sensitization. So we have some work to do in terms of increasing the education of whole grain flour. So next. So let's talk a little bit of fortification. My colleague had mentioned about fortification. And we saw about 40% of the population were aware. Although they said they are aware, we really wanted to ask them, what is it that you mean, you are understanding? And we saw there is a lack of understanding. Yes, they have heard about it, and they have mentioned, I've seen it somewhere on a pack of a maize flour, but I really don't know what it is. So when we asked them, can you tell us some of the things that you think is fortification? They said additives, chemicals, and preservatives. But some of them says, if you're adding something, it is good. Some of them mentioned, are you blending the flours with something? Because this is what we do even in our local markets. If I'm going to buy flour for porridge, they say, I will get the millet, I add a little bit of millet and maize flour and sorghum flour, and I blend them together. Is that what is fortification? But there was a gap on what industrial fortification is all about. So when we saw this, we educated them about what fortification is, the adding of nutrients to foods, and that in a standardized manner at the industrial level. And when we explained this, they said, yes, so this is a good thing that you guys are doing. That's good, and we acknowledge the benefits. If you guys are adding nutrients to this food, then it's a good thing. However, we are not sure what you guys are doing. So you can see some of the comments in the from the consumers is say, my view is that most companies are just in this for the business. So I would want clarity from KEBS whether these minerals were really added. So we see a gap in terms of, yes, you're telling me you're adding minerals, but am I really sure that's what is done? I want to see KEBS coming in and having a stamp of approval and saying, yes, this has been fortified and approved by KEBS. Then some people believed that fortified products will make them sick or they will die early, which is not the case. So some people know, yes, this is the reasons that are there in the market, but there needs to be clarity on that. So we have somewhere, next slide. So we have some work to do in terms of expanding our explanation on educating people, the society, on what is fortification. And we also asked the stakeholders the same. What is your understanding and what do you think the community understands what is fortification? The millers, as again, they said, yes, we recognize the benefits. But for us, only the large millers get support from, there's an association that is, they're calling KMFI, and often the small players will not take part in it. So only the large millers, we see them having this. Then they have very many challenges that are there. They identified high cost of fortificants, weak enforcement. Yes, only the large millers are expected to fortify. For example, those who have a capacity of 20 tons and over. But the smaller millers and micro millers, no one is looking to see that they have fortified their products. There's also unfair competition when we look at from the other side. So there needs to be a lot of consumer education around that, but they are also calling for policy enforcement, especially for the small scale millers. The community leaders are aware of the benefits, but they are very keen on telling us, there's a lot of misinformation in my community. As a chief, as a religious leader, I know people talk about GMOs and fears that, is this maize really good? Are they adding chemicals? Is it good for my family? Will I give them? But you're telling me it's good. So there's need for increasing of awareness so that we can integrate these fortified foods in the community. The administrators as well, they're talking about this limited market availability. If I go, I want to feed my school fortified foods, but where do I get this fortified whole grain flour at an affordable price? So that's also an area of concern. The nutritionists as well strongly support this. Yes, because they mentioned that, yes, whole grains and whole grains are nutritious. Then we fortify them. They give us essential for micronutrient deficiencies that are very widespread in our country. But there's very low levels of awareness. So we need to increase the sensitization. We need to have better curriculum inclusion, better distribution and packaging of the fortified foods. From the policy makers, yes, we had you, and they mentioned, yes, for example, the Food Fortification Act, it's there, it exists, but the implementation, when we go to different counties, it's very, very weak. Enforcement is inconsistent once it happens every now and then, but for example, the millers who do not fortify their flour, what penalties do they get? Yeah. Then there's all this misinformation. Yeah, do we have any benefits of, for example, if you are a miller and you fortify your foods, that you get subsidized, for example, where there's zero rated bread. That's just an example. Yeah. For the NGOs and the research institutions as well, they said we need to strengthen this collaboration. My friend mentioned about multi coming together of different stakeholders and working together to provide expanded community nutrition education. Next. And I think I would come to a close in that. I know people have very many comments in terms of that, and I will hand over to Magdalene.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing such rich insights. I know we are pressed for time and we could not get everything that we got from the research to share with the team. But as initially communicated, we'll be publishing the comprehensive report once it's finalized on our website, so you're able to get more insights. What has been shared today are just the key insights. Of course, there's more that is targeted to the different stakeholders that you have present in this meeting, and you can get that from the final report. So I'll just take a few questions before we proceed to the communication element. I know some of the questions are going to be addressed by the next presenter. So maybe just to highlight a few questions or to highlight a few comments and to address some questions that have come in. Okay. So this is from Asan. Thanks for the presentation. Great results. I would like to hear a little bit more if you looked the business case for whole grains in addition to packaging. What other issues would attract MSMEs to invest in whole grains? So I can hand over maybe this question to Joy to respond, and then anyone else that want to chime in can chime in.
Okay, thank you, Asan, and thank you, Magdalene and Sharon. Just to respond, yes, we have looked at the business case for investing in fortified whole grain foods, and the first or the main thing that we have done is we have worked on a financial model looking at the different grains. We've looked at maize, we've looked at rice, and we've looked at wheat. These are the three most consumed most consumed grains globally. So first, when we get to talk or to approach millers, you find that as it is currently, a majority of them are already processing refined flour or refined grains, because that is where the demand currently is and they're in business. So that is what they look at. So when we approach them with the whole grain foods case, we first of all don't ask them to stop the milling of refined flour. It's only an additional step whereby you only need to reconfigure the milling plant towards production of fortified whole grain foods, or rather fortified, in this case, fortified whole grain maize flour. And one will ask, what then will be the benefit, or how will this be at the end of it? So you find that when they get to refine and they get to produce refined maize flour, they get to remove the bran. So there's more or less 70 to 80% extraction rate, whereby if, for example, you have 100 kg of maize and you mill to produce refined flour, you'll get almost 70 or 80 kgs of refined flour. However, for whole grain, when you input 100, the output is 100. So, but what do millers do with this bran that they've removed, the 30% bran that they remove? You'll find many of them will go, if not disposing them, they'll get into a business of creating, or rather they'll create a plant whereby they get to also prepare the animal feeds. However, this business is also very critical because, as you all know, the demand also for animal feeds is very seasonal. Yeah, sometimes it's there, sometimes when the weather is rainy, you find there's not much demand. And even when the demand is there, you find that these businesses get to sell the animal feed that they've come up with from the bran at a much lower price. So if you put all that price together, it still does not it's still not cheaper than when you get to mill and produce a fortified whole grain flour, whereby you get a cost parity at 100 kg output, and then you produce it. So if you look at the production costs for whole grain maize flour, some will argue that maybe because you need extra drying, there's the electricity cost, there's the, if you've mentioned packaging and all that, but it's good to notice that there's no increment in the capex. So when you compare the business of fortified whole grain production and the business where they refine they make the refined flour and the animal feed, you find that this the costs incurred, or the costs, the end cost of the end cost, you find they are more or less similar or even cheaper in whole grain, because as mentioned, the animal feed that they get to produce with the bran, they sell it at very lower prices. So you find that it does not make very much economical sense, and that is our case for the whole grain production. And other than that, that's what that was the response we have on that. So I hope that gets to answer the question well. And you had also asked about looking at the literature on whole grain production across in different countries. So one of the key challenges that millers get to face, or rather we get to face, is there are no explicit policies towards promotion of whole grain foods. And in many, or in different countries, you find it's classified as a high risk product, whereby fortification is not very much are common because of the aflatoxin, level. Rather, it's high susceptibility to aflatoxin because of the bran and the jam availability. So through this, one of the key things that we have done as FWGA, we have actually conducted some research and development work, whereby we have been able to successfully bring the shelf life. You'll find once we share the report, you'll get a full picture of what we got from the consumers. And shelf life is one of a big issue, not even just for the millers, but for the consumers. And this then reflects towards even the policies that we have. Because of this shelf life issue, it's more or less 14 days before it turns rancid or it starts getting bitter. You find that people get discouraged from its consumption, and even millers get discouraged from its production. But through the research we've conducted, we've been able to increase the shelf life from 14 days to up to 5.5 to 6 months shelf life, which is ideal for procurement as well as for consumption before it even gets rancid. So this is R&D work that we have currently done, and we are also still continuing to even increase the shelf life further. And I think it's a really good breakthrough in terms of advancing the consumption of these fortified whole grain foods.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Joy. And again, much appreciation to the participants that are keeping this conversation going, for the comments, for the questions. I think we'll take one more question before I invite Vanessa to take us through the communication bit. So this is addressed. Thank you, Rita, for the question. This is very specific to Collins and Sharon. Would you happen to have any preliminary analysis that localized specifically to Kakamega and Nairobi, rather than the aggregated and broader urban and or rural categories? I presume this is someone that wants to make maybe tailored interventions to the counties, to the specific counties. So is it possible for that preliminary analysis to be shared?
Thank you. Let me go first. So thank you, Rita, for that, for acknowledging that there is need for an analysis past the general rural urban. Yes, we have been able to conduct further assessment from three important regions. Still, also we have been able to cluster under those three important regions are the high potential agricultural areas, which is consist of Uasin Gishu and Murang'a. We have the ASAL area, which is comprised of Kitui and Turkana, which forms the second region called an ASAL region. Then there's the urban region, which comprises of Nairobi, Mombasa. Under those categories, when we are kind of having, we are doing the narrative or kind of explaining the findings under those three important categories, we are able to kind of support the findings which you are getting under those regions based on the counties which have been we have been categorized. So I was just doing a short write-up on the comment section for you, but it's still okay. So that is exactly what we are doing. You have not done from a county perspective, but we have been able to go further in sub-regions. We are talking about high potential agricultural areas, ASAL areas, which comprise of Kitui and Turkana, and also we have urban, which is Nairobi, Mombasa. So we are able to get understanding from those region, from that perspective. Additionally, we are able to support based with the specific county characteristics or kind of intriguing results which we are able to find and support the findings with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Collins. Sharon, do you have anything to add on that?
Thank you, Collins and Magdalene. I think Collins has answered that question correctly. And we do have, for sure, we do have county-specific data, but then we clustered them together to kind of see the emerging patterns across these regions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharon. Now that we've seen the insights from the research, we've seen that people are actually, there's some level of awareness, though not a lot, on whole grains, on fortification. People appreciate the benefits of whole grains tied to the culture, tied to the tradition, the satiety. People appreciate that, but still there are barriers that hinder them from taking this. Or also we've seen this also over advertisement of refined flour. So with the insights that you've gotten from the research, how does that inform communication? And also, what did we get to learn from people about communication? Because for any interventions to be conducted and implemented successfully, reaching to the consumers, some form of communication has to be done. So I'll invite Vanessa to take us through walk us through the communication insights and what this means for the next step of this project that you're undertaking. So over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Magdalene. And we're having really great conversations. Thank you to the presenters as well, and to the team online that is sharing their thoughts as well as their questions with us. So I think what we've seen from the data so far, and even from some of those verbatims that have come in from the research, is that We all know that whole grains are a nutrition game changer in our societies and in our countries or nations at large. As Kenyans, we definitely love our ugali. I think we did a quick spot check on across online platforms, and we're finding about over 1 million mentions of ugali per day. Would you believe it? And it's from mentions of what people are eating to some banter around how differently people are making their ugali. I think I recently saw someone making mango ugali, and I'm sure everyone has the different opinions about how they like the ugali. But I think what we've also seen is that even with this, the love of this as a staple, the closer that it gets to, being made or being consumed with refined flour, then the farther it gets away from its nutritional roots. And so, our role now in this study is to take in all the insights that we've managed to collect so far with the team, and understand these barriers and factors that different respondents have actually highlighted, and then see how we can try and influence or even address some of those challenges that they've actually highlighted, and then look at how to change the tide to nudge behavior into more consumption of whole grains from their understanding of it, from things that have come out quite strongly, like taste being something that people are quite keen on. So those are some of the things that I'll take you through. We're going to look at the insights, we'll look at how we did our creative testing, and we'll have a look at how we're looking at going into the media with this. So at the beginning of any communication campaign planning, we begin with an insight, which is basically a human truth. It's a motivation or a core belief that actually anchors why a person chooses certain habits or certain behaviors. And what we've seen and what's come out quite truly in the research is that people do understand the need for good nutrition. People understand the importance of whole grain. However, we're in a point in time where the convenience culture has really taken over. And therefore, what starts to happen is that modern cues are what are being rewarded. So people are looking at, how do I do this? What can I do faster? If it's something that's aspirational, I will more likely lean towards that than lean towards my traditional roots. So the insight for us is basically to create communication that tries to nudge people more away from the convenience culture that people feel a bit stuck in, and go back to, if we already understand that whole grains are more nutritious for us, are better for our bodies and for our families, to help us achieve final aspirations and our bold ambitions as people and as communities, then what do we need to say to them in order to get them to the level of more consumption? So we look at specifically what are the benefits or even the attributes of a whole grain. We know that it has higher nutrition and minerals within it. We understand that we understand its role and its benefits in actually lowering aspects of malnutrition, helping us combat some of these non-communicable diseases that are running rampant across societies. I'm sure we have a lot of family members that we can actually point to who are undergoing challenges with that. And finally, it drills down to the children. We've talked about the fact that a key entry point for us will be the school feeding programs and how we're able to embed whole grain consumption within those. And at the end of the day, a healthy child is a happy child. And what we're trying to do is prop up the next generation to be healthy, to perform well, to be healthy in order for us to continue to achieve our ambitions as a nation. You can go to the next slide, and the next one after that. Therefore, where we landed from after thinking about the insight, understanding the barriers that we have, and knowing the key audiences that we're focusing on, we really want to put the whole grain on the pedestal that it deserves, right? we understand the nutritional and functional benefits of the whole grain. We want to start tying that into the emotional benefits that we know also come with nutrition within individuals and families. So this is basically the campaign that we have decided to anchor this social behavior change on, is around a rallying call basically for parents to invest in healthier meals for their families. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that our campaign idea is grains of greatness. We are already clear that there are higher vitamins, higher levels of minerals in whole grains themselves. Now, the play on creativity here comes when you look at greatness. What else does greatness mean? It means ambition. It means fulfilling your dreams. It means community growth. So we want to basically make a direct tie between the whole grain and greatness from within it as the grain itself, but also when it comes to the ambition of a people. And here we have a nice visual showing a very happy and healthy child. And the copy that we have reads, "Whole grains of greatness boost my health and keep me feeling great every day." So you see, this is where we start to tie in that actual emotional benefits of consuming these whole grains, which is this child understands that it boosts their health and it keeps them feeling great every day. So we took this into testing with our different groups, and you can go to the next slide. And we rather designed our testing around a couple of things. First, there's the words that you see on the screen. But beyond that, we also looked at the direct functional benefits, which are taste, which are satiation, which are boosted health, wholesome growth, as well as boosted health. Now, when we started talking to these respondents about, what their understanding is of these words, what do they resonate with? Fortification was understood to be adding a value of health into something. They understood that it was a level of a positive increment that would benefit their bodies in terms of health. When it came to the term around fortified, the same notion around it was there. However, now we started getting some negative perceptions about what's really, are these elements that the fortification is happening with, right? What are these elements? Are they highly processed? So this is where we start seeing that delineation between, there's an awareness that fortification is good, but what we still have work to do on is the actual understanding of what it is and of what it is in order to put people at ease of accepting fortified foods. And then their understanding of grains of greatness, I think, was quite spot on because they felt that it indicates the variety of the grains that we have. It indicates happiness, strength, and other elements. But there are also questions about, does it speak to nutrition? Does it speak to satisfaction? And the great thing is that the campaign actually does speak to all of those things. And it is about how we then break it down for the consumers to help them understand why it would cover all those elements for them. We again had conversations around the breakdowns, again, still around fortification, helping them understand that it's vitamins and minerals, because there are some questions asked about what exactly are these foods being fortified with, and there are positive reception towards that. And especially around understanding that vitamins and minerals are inextricably, tied to health, which means people will be healthier. Key things that we saw from the research was elements of taste. So we wanted to understand what are people's understanding of what taste is, right? And people talked about, what the food looks like, the sweetness of food, the aroma, just all these positive elements that you associate with food that makes you feel good, that you are eager to eat, and that you actually enjoy eating. We've talked about aspects aspects of health, and especially linked to disease prevention. And then also back to the whole grain itself, which is the anchor of the entire campaign. Its roots back into tradition, its focus on the naturalness of the ingredients, and also just a bit of pride about our tradition and the fact that these are indigenous foods. And the conversations around when you look at certain diseases coming up now, there's always mentions of, when I go to my grandmother's place, to my grandfather's place, these are diseases that perhaps were not as rampant back then because of the kind of food they ate. So just trying to tie it back to those specific traditional cues that people already understand, but perhaps are just not acting upon. So in the next slide, we start to look at the visuals that we think, that we wanted to test rather, to see if they would resonate with the functional benefits. Remember, the functional benefits that we're talking about here are taste, satiation, brain development, boosted health, and wholesome growth. So specifically for the men, these are the images that came out quite strongly. In terms of taste, it was about seeing a family at a table actually enjoying the meal that they're eating together. You have, a mother feeding the child. You have the father and the daughter sort of reaching out for the same food. When it comes to satiation, it was about having a look of happy and healthy kids, right? Kids who are showing that they're strong, kids who are in school doing possibly consumption during school time and showing that they're enjoying their food and they look happy and healthy. Therefore, the men felt that this is a child who looks full and is probably ready to learn. When it comes to brain development, what resonated most was direct imagery of children in school with books, elements that show direct learning, and the fact that this is actually a benefit that comes with the consumption of fortified whole grains. And then with boosted health, it was centered around the family as well as elements of strength, because the understanding was that elements like immunity that are central to boosted health means that you have strength as a family, strength as children, they have energy and the likes. Then the last bit was around wholesome growth. And it was really interesting to see that wholesome growth was centered on images that depicted families together. So you see a family coming together, looking healthy, looking happy. Like we said, a happy child is a healthy child, and you can see that in the imagery, and that's what resonated with the men. In the next slide, we look at what resonated more with the women, and again, you see that element of taste coming in quite heavily, and around consumption as a family. So it's already great to see that people's understanding of something tasty is something that the whole family can and should enjoy. And we've also seen elements of boosted health that they thought showed energy in terms of having the energy to play. There's a group there of girls playing football. That also showing a happy and healthy family in terms of they look healthy in terms of their immunity. They look strong. They look like they're of good health. Again, brain development directly tied to performance in school. You can see a child eagerly shooting her hand up as if, to answer a question. And especially when you look at the background and you see that, the rest of the children they seem to be a bit sluggish, a bit tired. It shows that this specific child, has the energy to concentrate in class and to participate. The other concern that also came up with men, or rather consideration, not concern, is also satiation. The women were also keen on satiation. And for them, it was to ensure really that, when my child is in school, I want to ensure that they are full in order to be able to continue with their studies, concentrate in class, not be distracted and the likes. And that's why you see that image of, a child in uniform having a meal in school. In terms of wholesome growth, for the women, it's centered, you can see a bit more on the children. And I think this was really around the fact that children are still growing, right? So wholesome growth when it comes to energy, when it comes to strength, is something that they're quite keen on. But overall, again, and similar to the men, is this specific image of a happy and healthy family, showing that there is wholesome growth together and wholesome health together as a family. So with that knowledge, and going into the next slide, if we have an understanding of our barriers, we have an understanding of our insights, then what we would be looking at is, where do we take this message in order to reach these people? Where do we take this message to reach the parents? Where do we take this message in order to reach the children, who we have discussed are actually quite influential in the choices made in terms of food in the home? So when you look at nationally, the popular channels, I think there's certain mainstays that remain king, in form of TV as a source of trust, specifically because seeing is believing. Radio, just because of its mass reach, right, and the fact that it's so diversified into different languages that anyone is really able to connect. There's also a lot of programming when it comes to radio that actually really focuses on community issues, and this is why it came out strongly as a channel or as a platform to have these conversations on and have this messaging on. Facebook also came out quite strongly, and this is because we are really a social first nation, or strongly embedding ourselves as a social first nation, especially in areas where we have good internet connectivity, and conversations between certain groups on nutrition, on health, are why this also came out strongly as a channel that it would be necessary for us to consider. I think by gender, when it comes to which platforms really resonated across them, with women, you start seeing elements of social proofing coming in. They want to have conversations with other groups. They want to speak to other mothers, other women, understand what worked for you. Let me also share my experience with you, and we can sort of talk through a solution. So it's starting to look at places that where they usually gather, being churches, being even barazas, being chama meetings, just where these conversations happening, and how can we start to get conversations about fortified whole grains and the benefits of consuming them for their family. And then with men, it was more around let's call them the mainstream trusted sources of information, like TV. Something else that was also very strong and that we would be engaging in is around the experts in our communities when it comes to nutrition. These are the doctors, these are the nurses, these are the community health experts and teams that we have in different parts of the country. It's being able to work with them, for them to explain what are the actual benefits of consumption of fortified whole grains. It's working with them to be able to dispel some of the notions that people have around fortification, to really get down to the grassroots and explain to people that this is what it means and this is why it is actually beneficial to your family and their overall health. I think a trend that we've seen possibly balloon over the last couple of years is the use of popular figures such as celebrities and now influencers. And the great thing with influencers is that I think they're quite diversified, especially in Kenya. You can have your high-end influencer on Instagram. You can also have your rural vernacular influencer on TikTok, who only posts content in their vernacular language. And now you see being able to work with a pool of these influencers, because they've already built their communities, is how we'd also try and get our messaging out there. Additionally, with influencers, this categorization of influencers, there are those who are also focused on elements of nutrition and cooking, and so you see it's very authentic for them to have such conversations with their community, and that is definitely something that we would try and tap into. I think lastly, in terms of nutrition preferences, by gender, just to reiterate what we said, is that women prefer to have the conversations with different individuals, whether with community health officials, with nutritionists, with their community, whether at church, whether at chamas. They really want to have the conversation, and then they have the confidence that comes up from other people around them agreeing that this consumption of fortified whole grains would be the way to go for us to boost our immunity, to ensure our children have more energy so that they're able to actually participate in school and build a better life for all of us. And then with men, it's more what are the actual trusted sources of information, and some cases of word of mouth, but though linked to more experts in the sector, such as nutritionists. So when we look at our final slide, which is then what will we do, or how do we plan to approach it? We are very clear on the need to use a mix of media channels, right? It's not about going in and only having the messaging come out strongly on TV. We need to do the same on radio. We need to do the same on social media. We need to be able to even reach people when they're outside. What can we put up on billboards that people can connect with, perhaps when they're in traffic? Another important thing, especially around radio, is the point of the localization of the campaign, as well as the conversations around it, just to make sure that we're truly having a national conversation, and especially in a language that everyone can understand. And then we talked about the use of interpersonal channels, whether from the different community members, the nutritionists, the school head teachers, the religious leaders who are extremely influential, conversations in the church and really rallying people towards a certain cause that's better for the community. And then also down to the market where people are actually buying their food, for us to have cooking demonstrations. Seeing is believing, and also tasting, so that we can do some live demonstrations for people to understand what is this new product, how can I actually integrate it into my current routine. We can have someone there also talking to you about the benefits, so that by the time you are leaving an engagement like that, you have full information, awareness, and understanding of fortified whole grains, and you're also able to pass that to the community. And we get some good word of mouth going around, so that we start celebrating and amplifying the role of of whole grains in our community and the benefits that we all stand to gain from it. And that is our approach on the social behavior change campaign, with our campaign, The Grains of Greatness. Just handing it back over to you, Magdalene. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for such rich insights. Just trying to see how we can translate these results that you've gotten into action, and how do we and for taking us through on how to influence the behavior, so that you can increase the consumption and adoption of these fortified whole grains. So this research, or this piece of work, does not end here. And before, maybe because I see we are running out of time, before we can go to the comments, allow me to invite Joy, maybe just to take us through the next piece of work. Now that we're done with the research, what's next? What are we planning to do next? So over to you, Joy. You can take us through that briefly.
Okay. Thank you, Magdalene, and thank you, everyone. So now we have completed this research, and we are actually now just doing the final touches on the combined full report that has very many different and interesting aspects. We just cherry picked a few that we thought would be will form a really good discussion for today. However, to get the full picture of what we undertook during the research, you'll be able to see that in the finalized report, which, as Magdalene has mentioned, will not only publish it or have it on our website, but we're also looking to have this published on open source publications and journals, so that you may be able to use this as a reference material. You can be able to read through to get insights, because currently there's we don't have much evidence on whole grain consumption as well as production. So this work also builds into that evidence that one can use. Another step that we will actually undertake will be the social and behavior change campaign, whereby we'll conduct a targeted social and behavior change campaign, a below the line as well as an above the line campaign, whereby we'll get to conduct the campaigns within the school environment, targeting school children. As we all know, they are good agents of change, and it's easier to change a habit or rather to introduce positive habits and ensure they are adopted from a younger age compared to what you will do, or rather the results that you'll achieve from an adult. So we'll have targeted campaigns at school, targeting children as well as teachers and the parents, everyone within the school ecosystem. And we are looking to roll out these campaigns in Q1 of 2026. So that's early next year. And this will also be supported by additional channels such as the radio campaigns. We'll also have community engagements that will be done using local and very understandable language, so that we're able to communicate. We've been having many nutrition interventions and many communication packs on nutrition, really good ones, but the issue comes in how we deliver them as people within this space. So we want to tailor these messages in a way that it's easy to comprehend, easy to adopt, and easy to even visualize, that can be adopted by different members within the community. So that is another step that we are going to undertake. Thank you. Back to you, Magdalene.
Okay, thank you so much, Joy, for that. And a big thank you to all our speakers. I think today's conversation was quite heavy. I would say even the 2 hours that we allocated for this webinar was not sufficient to deliver all the results or the insights that you got from the research. But thank you for being able to unpack the key insights during this time. Also, thank you so much to our participants. You've really kept the speakers on bumper, just trying to respond to all the questions that are coming through the comment section. I think there's so many. We've tried our best to address all of them. For the ones that maybe if yours has skipped our eyes, we'll still try and respond to the question offline through our LinkedIn page. And thank you so much also for the positive comments that are coming. It's quite encouraging to the team of that undertook this research, and also to the commissioner of this research. So we really appreciate that. As you've seen from the insights, despite knowledge on nutrition, knowledge being or awareness on nutrition being high, or people knowing what foods are healthy, the consumption rate is still low, and there are barriers that we've seen that hinder the consumption of these foods. And again, with the levels of malnutrition being really high in the country, of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. This is not work that can be done by one partner, but rather, or by one sector, but rather having multi-sectoral collaboration. And we are happy to lead this kind of work. As Fortified Whole Grain Alliance, we are happy to lead this kind of work. So it's just to call upon different players in the industry, whether it's for the private sector industry, just to make this available, to make these nutritious foods available in the market. As we've seen, availability is one of the biggest barriers. Also for the people in the government, for the policymakers, enacting this or enforcement of these policies. I saw someone on the comment on the chat say enforcement sounds scary, but we are trying to address a more scary, I would say, issue in the country, which is malnutrition. And I know Vanessa has been saying a healthy child is a happy child. Also, I think a healthy nation is a wealthy nation, is a happier nation. So we need to put our efforts together to address this. For the development partner supporting nutrition specific interventions, we have a lot of resources, and also we are open to collaboration to see how we can drive this agenda further. Yeah, and also we are happy to share the resources on social behavior change for those that might be interested to use, or for those that are doing this piece of work. We are happy to cross share these pieces of information or knowledge, or information that we've gotten from this research. Also, we have a lot of resources on our website for the research and development work that has been done across different countries, including Kenya. For the private sector players that maybe would want to know or would want to learn on how to extend or address some of these sensory attributes that are coming out strongly from the research. We are happy to work together. We have members, a membership of millers who we support. We provide technical assistance to, and also support. So we are happy to collaborate with you to drive this agenda. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for participating in this webinar, and also maybe just a special thanks to Fortified Whole Grain Alliance for sponsoring this webinar, and to Novo Nordisk Foundation, who are the funders of this work. We really appreciate that, and would love for you to stay connected, for you to access all our resources. I know I have overemphasized on this, but please follow us on our social media pages so that you can get to see the work that you're doing, and also you can access the resources that you have available for everyone. Yeah, so let's keep this conversation so that we are able to make great changes. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.